parts of the body according to the several natures. So basically he's saying when you eat something by a process of evaporation, animal heat, he's referring to evaporation, this is how fresh water becomes salty. Just like when you eat a Twinkie and you go to the bathroom and you defecate that Twinkie, that's the same thing which happens when you see salt water and fresh water. So of course, needless to say, this is a gross scientific error. We all know this is not how this does not describe the relationship of salt and fresh water. So my point here is, again, I don't think the author of the Quran was plagiarizing from Aristotle, or else he would have copied this gross scientific error in his book. Notice this is a point to be noted. Aristotle had no clue, no idea that there was actually a physical barrier between the salt and the fresh water. He had no idea of this. And notice also another thing, the things which he did write about salt and fresh water, that is all observable to man. Meaning, if I were to conduct experiments on salt and fresh water, and I had or a man 1400 years ago were able to do this, he would be able to also come to the same conclusion. So his observations were observable. That's a point to be noted also. So yes, he talked about that picnic line, but he didn't talk about the barrier. Oh, let me ask a question again. Out of all of the scientific statements I've been showing in the Quran, what is the scientific truth over scientific error ratio? Who can tell me? It's 1 out of 0 for everyone. Every single one of them. 1 out of 0. Okay. Let me continue. Now we're going to talk about, we're still on the topic of oceanography. Let's look at the 5th piece of evidence. Scientists have only recently discovered that at the very bottom of the ocean, it is completely dark. That is, you're going to have to travel 1,000 meters, and after you traveled 1,000 meters in the ocean, it's complete pitch darkness. In fact, if you've ever seen the movie Titanic, the Titanic is actually at the very bottom of the sea, and the Titanic right now resides in complete total darkness. Now, man, on the other hand, he could probably swim about, at the most, 40 meters down in the ocean without special equipment. So he can only go about 40 meters, but like I said, once you go down 1,000 meters, that's when you see that it's complete pitch darkness. And scientists have only recently been able to discover these detailed pieces of information about the seas. Now let's see what the Quran has to say about this. Chapter 24, verse 40 of the Quran. It's talking about the disbeliever, the disbelievers is like the darkness in the vast deep seas. And it goes on in the later verse. In the same verse. If a man were to stretch out his hand, he can hardly see it. And for whom Allah has not appointed light, for him there is no light. It says in the Quran, there is no light for him. And it's talking about the vastness, deep ocean. So the Quran is saying that at the very deep, dark levels of the ocean, it is complete darkness. And that's like the analogy of a disbeliever. He lives in complete darkness. Again, excuse me, this is exactly what scientists today have told us. That the oceans, after 1,000 meters, is complete depth darkness. I would raise a question. How did the author of the Quran know this type of scientific information? Okay, let's look at evidence number 6 over here. We're gonna get off the topic of oceanography. I produced for you 3 pieces of evidences of oceanography. Basically, that the author of the Quran knew that there was a barrier between the seas. He knew, number 2, that he knew that there was a barrier between salt and fresh water, and the author of the Quran also knew that there was a barrier, that at the very depth levels of the ocean is complete darkness. Let me now move on to proof number 6 here. We're going to talk about geology. If you have a topographical globe, topographical globe shows the elevations and depressions